Hello and welcome to the mixed video series honoring the Emmy Awards. We're here to talk about The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Season 4, Episode 408, that's season finale. For those of you who haven't been paying attention, this is the Amazon Prime Video's stellar series set in 1950s, 60s New York. We go in and out of comedy clubs, in and out of the Upper West Side, and we follow the adventures of Miriam Midge Maisel, a stand-up comic who, at this point, is guys sort of in a groove and not in a groove. She's seen some success, but she keeps being her own worst enemy at certain points. And it's just episode 408. It feels very emotional for a comedy or drama series. This is quite an emotional episode. We have these two sides of Mrs. Maisel. One is the family drama going on with hospitals and Upper West Side apartments, and the other is that career drama that takes place as we see Lenny Bruce rising and her in the burlesque hall, for a sense. Ron, can you talk to us a little bit about sort of where we are here at this point in the series, where we're all around New York at this point?
Season 4 is kind of interesting in that regard. You know, she was on a trajectory, for the first 3 seasons, and then season 4 kind of hits. And I think we're dealing with Midge, feeling her oats, feeling like she could really do something, but really not having the proper direction to go. So she tries to find her way by her rules. And I think that's one of the conflicts that existed in the entire season. And it also allowed all the other characters in that context, like while Midge was almost kind of running in place, it allowed everyone else to develop further characterizations and further characters, which, kind of culminate in that last episode. So that's kind of where I think all of season 4 was.
Well, New York's a complicated city. We have, I love the fact that we go into the Upper West Side and then down to the basements of the Village. That sort of beatnik, smoky jazz club, the Gaslight. These are real places. Matthew, the locations in and around New York. New York's rooms are small and tight, and clubs are small and dark. This is a challenge, and there's outstanding dialogue recording here. Can you talk to me about the environments a little bit?
Well, I have to say, because of COVID, which really changed everything around for season 4, they knew that they couldn't go out to location as much as they used to. So they built a lot of sets. The Wolford set, that's a set on the stage. It's an extraordinary set, one of my favorite of all time. It's beautiful. And the Gaslight Club has always been a set on the stage as well. So a lot of these smoky environments, they're small, but they're somewhat controlled because we are inside. A lot of the exteriors are done obviously on the streets. They have to bring in period cars, and we shoot a lot with the New York noise. We of course try to avoid major car horns and sirens and New Yorkisms.
I just felt that New York noise last weekend, and it's out there all the time.
It's so loud in New York City. Mixers come in from LA, and they're like, "How do you guys do it?" But you kind of, you rely a lot on radio mics and isotope.
Yeah,
to save the day. So the locations are usually pretty good in terms of control, because a lot of them are interiors built on the set. So we start out, the very first scene is in the Gaslight, and that's again on the stage. So that wasn't too bad. We have taken the vintage mic shells and retrofitted them with current electronics, usually Shure lavaliers that go right into the shell, so that they sound good. And I use them a lot for the stand-ups. And whenever you see a mic on a stand, it's almost always a working mic. So that helps a lot too. And we wire them, of course, try to keep it as clean as possible. Because as I learned from Ron, if they have any noise, clothing noise on the mic, and he adds reverb to it, that will be there as well. So we work really hard at keeping the mics clean.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned they're standing up, but there's very it's almost, there's very little time in this show where they're sitting still. I mean, this moves a lot. I mean, I imagine when you're recording, there's a lot of scenes where Midge is walking through apartments, walking through a club, walking down a street. And the camera follows her. It's sort of like a little dance they play. Did you move around a lot on set, Matt?
The camera's almost always moving. It's rare that we slow down and have small or calmer scenes, which is why the scene in 408 with Abe and Shirley is so extraordinary. We did a scene, I think it was in season 4 with Abe and Midge, talking about how little money he makes at the Village Voice as a theater critic. And those scenes they stand out, and they're even more powerful because when you stop, it just takes you to a different place. Because when we're moving all the time, there's an energy that takes you along with it. So it's nice to have the small moments as well. But we radio mic almost all the time. We try to boom when we can, because I've done a lot of TV, but my sensibilities are definitely cinematic. So we try to get the nice open sound of a boom mic. But we almost always have to wire, especially when the camera's flying around like that. Especially in the apartment, the booms can't reach it. They're walking and talking down long hallways, and it's just gotta make it work somehow.
This one opens down a hospital hallway while they're running, right? They're going in. I mean, I think this show actually opens. They're running. They hear about Maisel, and that's a typical shot in here. And yet, this dialogue, I want to talk. Let's start with the dialogue. It's snappy. It's fast. It has its own rhythm. Conversations feel like a comedy exchange, almost like an Abbott and Costello at times, or an old radio drama. Regular dinner conversations. Matthew first capturing it, and Rod keeping that pace and that rhythm. I mean, it's snappy, Matthew.
Well, it's the scripts are like what, Matt? The scripts are usually like
85 pages.
80 to 90 pages long, crammed into 50 minutes, and they don't really drop anything. I mean, it's that kind of pace from the get-go. Whether or not the editing helps or not to keep it going, it's flat out Formula One racing dialogue.
It's a rapid fire at times. Is that challenges? I mean,
challenging
on the set, or is it the same as anything else?
Well, I've always referred to the show as a 1950s Technicolor movie musical dramedy, screwball dramedy, and definitely the pacing of the dialogue absolutely reflects that. But yeah, I do hard cues when I mix. I really keep a bunch of faders open at once. I mean, to be technical about it, I'll try to keep only one mic open at a time. So when they're flying through the dialogue, it's got to stay on top of it. But I've learned the pace of the show, so it's really, it's kind of, oh yeah, okay, we're doing that. The tricky stuff is when we get into scenes where they there's a scene in the current season, which I won't describe it, but you have a dinner table scene where we're having two different conversations, 3 men on one side, 3 men on the other, and they're all having the conversation at the same time. And we film them all at the same time. So you have 6 people talking overlapping dialogue all at once. We saw that in the Catskills episode too, when they first move into the house and the camera's across the street. And we see them unpacking for the place and all yelling from room to room and out to the road and all the rest of that. So that's where it gets really tricky, trying to balance.
Sounds a little bit like a Robert Altman movie, except you want to hear it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's a little bit like that, and they add a lot to those scenes. It's like you have an argument on camera, and then the camera moves to somebody else. We continue that argument, and you may never even really hear all the detail of that, but they write for that whole argument to continue on. And it may be something way back in the background, but it's been done and scripted as well. So, they're always, there's not a lot of holes in Maisel as far as dialogue goes.
Very true. Well, you mentioned one earlier that really struck me. It's because it involves the hospital scene, but it takes place back in the Upper West Side living room. It's 2 people who are out of their houses, their own house, and they're just meeting at the end of a long day. They're sitting quietly in the living room. It's almost like you can breathe. But then you want to be sad, but there's comedy going on the whole time. I mean, it never stops. Can you talk to me about that scene, Ron? Do you remember the living room scene with Shirley and Abe talking?
I do. No, it has just come off of pretty dramatic moments in the hospital, finding out that Shirley's husband has had a heart attack, and whether or not he's going to live or not. So that whole scene is about death in a lot of ways, like looming over these older people. I forget, and I'm sorry for that. I forget what is playing on TV, but Abe is watching TV. So in addition to their dialogue, there is something going on.
He wants her to watch The Twilight Zone, I believe. I think he wants her to watch
that one. I don't think it's The Twilight Zone on that one.
Was the TV actually on, or did they just refer to it? No, I'm not remembering either.
What?
Was the TV actually on? Was there something on the TV?
There is. There's something playing the whole time. And we were actually using some of the score that's in that old film to help, weave our way through the scene. And again, it's played down, it's played squeezed, it's played out of an old TV, but it's there, and it provides Abe a distraction to not have to deal with the emotions. He's able to tune to the TV and watch a little bit. And he does that often. He doesn't take his eyes from the TV while Shirley's going on her whole spiel. But we're treating that whole scene, in kind of a, it's kind of like a blanket has been put over a normal Maisel scene. It's quieter. It's, it's winter outside. So, the traffic is very muffled. Every now and then there might be a snowplow you hear scraping along, ripping up the streets that happen in New York. But other than that, it's an incredibly quiet scene. They're the only two in the apartment at that point, in a way. I mean, Zelda's off doing something, but we're not hearing anything from her. So, that was one of our quietest scenes in Maisel ever.
but you need that. You need that type of.
You do,
pause.
But at the same time, Tom, it's not really quiet. It's like if you took the dialogue out, you'd hear all that stuff going on outside. You'd hear wind kind of like sneaking through a crack in a window. All that stuff we have to build in, because one of the things Maisel wants always to have in its possession is reality to help us ground that scene. They don't want to ever have the dialogue just floating there. It has to have meaning.
Yeah, and I listen some in headphones, I listen some on speakers. I try to hear this. And there's a lot of taking place. It's not just Walla. It's more like it's background reality. That's a good way of putting it. And then we come out of that scene, the quiet, to perhaps my favorite throughout is when we come from that drama for Midge on stage at Wolford's, right, at burlesque hall, sort of, to talk as she talks about her life. And we go into utter chaos as the Wolford's ends up, spoiler alert, getting raided. There's people running through the background.
You're being raided.
I am?
We gotta move.
Everyone out! Dallas Sunshine Bubbles, go!
I got the book!
Go, Sam! Buddy, Missy, you gotta move!
This scene of that review that takes place, that was an excellent scene. It must have been impossible to record.
Oh, I have to give Ron a lot of the credit for it. What's interesting about the show is the writing. It really, the thread that it carries through from the beginning to the end. When we originally see Midge picks Lenny Bruce up off the street, takes him home to clean him up, and then he's ungrateful and he's kind of hostile to her after. And so he comes back to Wolford to apologize. And that whole dialogue with them and how he tells her he's going to be in Carnegie Hall and they're going to paint her how important he is because they're going to paint his hotel room the color he wants. And leading into the raid is this wonderful thread, that this big set piece. It's paced so beautifully. But we wired and we boomed Midge and Lenny backstage, and then when they opened the stage, we had mics out on the stage capturing the chaos. But Ron really built a lot of that up. The guy's running right towards the camera, gets tackled. We recorded natural sounds, but Ron added like body blows and a lot of yelling and screaming. but even more so when we get back after the stage and they're in the dressing room and all the ladies are coming out. That was crazy because there was so much movement and so much activity and just trying to keep the radio mics clean with everything going on.
Wasn't that a one or two?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Matt?
Yes,
sorry to interrupt, but wasn't that a
yes,
one?
and it was a one or two. When we come off the stage, we follow them all the way around into the dressing room, all the way out till they finally leave and go into the storm. So it's all one shot.
Ron, how did you make the raid live then?
Well, for me, Ruth Hernandez is my ADR supervisor, and we use a wonderful loop group in town run by Dan Fink. And, they, again, the Maisel reality time, they look at that scene when those curtains part and you see that chaos. They see police over there. So they gave police some language to say, some words to say. Somebody's dangling from a chandelier. They gave them something. I mean, everybody there was spotted with some kind of, noise. And, some of it works its way through, some of it doesn't, but it's the reality of what's being done. There's no one doing walla. There's no one making up some storyline or just yelling or screaming. Everyone has a purpose in that loop group at that particular moment. And that guy that runs towards us, when he does finally get tackled, even we have him, you can hear it. He goes, oh, he really, it's like everything that happens. And that is, again, what gives us that depth of reality. We can play it. And we're never going to be embarrassed by hearing someone say, look, he's got a gun or something idiotic like that. Everybody has a place. So.
Oh, yeah. That's real interesting because it starts with her sort of quiet. I mean, it's a quiet comedy. I mean, they're expecting a comedy set, so very quiet into chaos. And then there's this moment when Lenny and her burst open the door and you're in a snowstorm. And then you're out. I understand they shot this in August, Matthew, or something like that, in New York City. But then you come out to it's almost like you come out to the intimacy of the street, which sounds odd, right? They bust out of indoors to be quiet on the street.
Well, it's the back of the wall, Wolford. So theoretically, the cops came in through the front. So.
Yeah, they just got out the back. Well, Lenny seems to get out of about everything anyway at this point. But that also brings up a point because there's music throughout there as well. And I would like to talk about music in general in this. Could you maybe begin, Ron? It is, I think, Matthew, you said at one point it's almost a character in the film or in the series, the way music is played. Score as source alone, score alone. Always seems appropriate. It somehow always seems appropriate without being obvious. Ron, do you want to talk about that? I mean, it must be a big part of the mix.
Well, Maisel, yeah, it is. Maisel really doesn't have score. If you think about it, Maisel is constructed on, music that basically dominates when it needs to dominate. So Amy and Dan, they have this vast library in their heads of, music from this era. And Robin Erdang, is that Robin Erdang, right? Yeah, she supplies them with stuff they can use and, make sure that everything's going to get cleared. But it's Amy and Dan who end up hammering out what to use and when to use it. And, they're the ones that kind of drive those particular moments. And I'm talking not just in that, Keystone Cop kind of Benny Hill way that happens after the raid hits in, but I'm talking like the music in, the restaurants, the music that might be playing out of a cartoon on TV. I mean, they really do shape that a great deal. I mean, when we're in a mix, we have, 6 or 7 options a lot of times for those little background things that, again, no one's going to really hear. If you mix it right, it's going to be part of the whole background, but it's not necessarily something that needs to be right on top of the scene. And then we have those other moments where it drives the whole scene. But then there's also the bands, in this particular, season, we have the Wolford Band, and Matt can talk to that. They record that live there in the Wolford.
Wow. But do they really? Because I think that scene has femininity or something, opens up with the
That
review.
one has femininity. Femininity is interesting. Femininity is a needle drop, but it's been augmented by the Wolford Band Orchestra in the beginning. to just give it that Wolford sound, but then we let the record kind of take over.
Well, and Matthew, if you could address that a minute, because a lot of the energy is in clubs. I mean, throughout the series. I mean, starting in the basement, the Gas Club, and at the end of season 4, we're in Carnegie Hall. So the music and sort of stand up on set. Can you describe the scenes?
Well, Maisel's unique in that Amy Sherman Palladino wants to have music recorded in the locations that we hear it in. So we will do pre-records in the spaces. We don't usually record live during the scene because you lose control that way. You want to be able to feed stuff into earwigs so we get dialogue clean and all the rest of that. But my utility is also our on-set music recordist, Spiros Poulos, and works with Stuart Lerman, our music producer. And they'll go in like the Wolford Band. They went in, they recorded that in the Wolford, in the pit, and so a lot of that stuff was there. They may augment it a little bit here and there later on in the studio, but generally it's live. When we're in the Button Club, Joel's Club, the band on stage, we go in early on the day or maybe the day before and pre-record the band in that space. And then we hand the recordings, might do a rough mix or even maybe a slightly tighter mix and hand it off to a Pro Tools playback person, Igor Panchenko. And then we do it like normal playback on the set. So it's kind of live on tape in a way when we play back.
And then when I get it, I get splits, and I'm able to readjust if we need to, and position the guitarist on the left and pan him over if it. I mean, we have a certain amount of control by the time it gets to the mix.
But you also have a certain sense of the room. Right. I mean,
yes.
And the rooms are characters. They are, especially in New York.
It helps a great deal.
I use so much room whenever I can, even with the wires, because I just really love to hear the space. I editorialize. It's my aesthetic. It's that I want to hear it as I see it, perspective wise. So if they're deep, a lot of times I'll do something. I don't know if Ron appreciates it or not, but if they're like walking away from us, as they walk away, I'll bring the radio mic, I'll bring the boom up a little bit so that's more space. If they're walking towards us, I might bring the radio mics up a little bit so that they come towards us, presence wise. So I do, I like to do that. I like to feel it the way I see it too.
I would think, and I've heard more and more of that lately, honestly. I remember talking to Wiley Stateman on King's Gambit during the chess match when he puts up 2 decatrees at the end of the church hallways just to get the room for Ron, right? He's not going to use it, but getting more and more of that real sound and giving it that real feel, I think. And we should mention that you share this nomination with George Lara and Stuart Lerman, correct? Can you brag about them a little bit since they can't be on picture with us?
George has been recording Foley for C5, where we do the Maisel work, since almost the inception of C5. He's been doing it since at least 1990. And, George is rather indispensable. He has a certain sound that he gets when he records. He works in the same idea that, we want to get a clean recording, but we also want to make sure it fits that scene. So it's not just a very close-up pen down. It's a pen down that fits within the acoustics of what we're looking at. And he and Marco, the Foley artist, they're like a team that way. They're like a old married couple in a way. They've been doing it for so long together that I don't know about the bickering, but I can tell you the end result is always great.
I do. And Stuart, the music is, I'm not sure his official title. I'm a little embarrassed.
I rarely ever see Stuart. I mean, because he's so busy working on the next episode usually, which, is not near me. Annette, who's our music editor, takes what Stuart does and works with it to get it toward me. I mean, so there's a constant push. Stuart's creating a lot of those mixes before it comes to me, and then I have to, basically wrangle it and put it in the film. But that's, Stuart's role is again, it's something that's been with us for like ever since the beginning of the show, and he's it wouldn't be the same kind of show without him.
Stuart's on set whenever we have music. Stuart's on set, so I work with him. I've worked with him a bunch, probably more than Ron has, and he's pretty amazing. He's done a lot of big shows. He's got an amazing ear, and when they're pre-recording, he'll go back to bar 12, from this and that. No, that's just a little off. No, you got to hit it a little sooner. I mean, he really has golden ears, and he knows how to shape the music. We're very lucky. We've been fighting for a while to get him on the Emmy nomination because there was a limitation to the amount of mixers, only 4. And the trick with Maisel is that, as Ron said, we don't really have a score. So we don't have, usually the category is scoring mixer. And then there's also music supervision, which is not really what he does either. That's where they pick the music, for the show, pre-recorded, songs and stuff. So we had I don't know what he's being called there, music mixer. I don't remember the exact title.
I forget how he went down, but it's a very unique role that he plays mainly just because of the way Maisel works. I mean, because we have so much live music, it's a very unique kind of role that he has.
Well, there's something very important because in this show in particular, the music and dialogue set pace. They determine script. They set this. And they go together hand in glove here in this show. And it's also one last thing I'd like to ask you about. It's a period piece. And in some sense, you have to have the right cars. You have to have the right phones. But you don't necessarily want a dirty old mono FM track, that sounds, you don't want to make it sound like 1950 in 2022, right? I mean, it feels like it has a modern sound to it while being in a period piece. Am I right there? Do you think about those things?
Yeah, we do. We had a discussion early on when we were putting the pilot together, many seasons ago about, how serious do we want to be about the 60s? And Amy was like, I just want it to sound great. I don't care if it's the right thing or not. I mean, we have to be as true as we can be. We always struggle sometimes trying to get the right subway sound, because, we're so used to a certain kind of sound those subways make. Back then, they didn't really sound that way. So, those kind of discussions do come up and we have to work out things. And then when Dan says, well, I want to hear a bell for the door close. And you say, well, but did they make a bell sound? I mean, again, we're used to a certain thing. Do we then cheat or what? And again, I think the storyline is that we want to tell the story. It's not so much about the accuracy of the time. It's about the flow. If a bell becomes appropriate because it helps you motivate into the subway, then we'll find a way to put a bell in. It's that kind of a.
And Maisel is heightened. It's a heightened reality. As part of the zaniness of the show. When we're out in the street and we have period cars. I mean, let's say it's 1960. All the cars look brand new. I mean, they're all shiny and pretty and colorful. If you were on the streets of New York in 1960, I'm sure there'd be a lot of cars from the late 40s, beaters from the early 50s and stuff like that. But Maisel is a very shiny show that way, and so even though there are always...
It's like her dresses.
Yeah, not to mention the wardrobe, right?
It's like her dresses. Everyone is new.
Yeah. That's one of the things after watching, I just sort of struck by, if you close your eyes, it plays. It plays like a radio drama or an old snappy, who's up first, what's on second, kind of at times. But then you open your eyes and it's just visually stunning and beautiful. I don't know if it's what you expect when you open your eyes, but lots of bright colors, lots of hallways. Let's close with the idea of Carnegie Hall. I love the idea. It's called How Do You Get to Carnegie Hall? We end with Lenny Bruce, but we end not with his success and his amazing, true show, but him bringing her back out to a quiet Carnegie Hall. I mean, you've had the 2,500 people in the house, and then we close with him and Midge on stage. What was that scene like, Matthew? When it's just the two of them, and you have to hear their footsteps it's George, but you have to hear their footsteps on the wood, and nobody's in the audience.
Luke Kirby is a gem. who plays Lenny Bruce, and he and Rachel Brosnahan, who plays Midge, of course, they have this insane chemistry. As you saw in the Blue Room scene in the same episode, that scene is just perfect, tonally, and the performances are phenomenal. So whenever they do scenes together, there's a special spark. But they were both wired, of course, because we need the direct sound. But we boomed wherever we could. Even when it gets a little wide, we'll throw a boom over them because, again, I like to hear the space. I know a lot of TV mixers, it's all radio mics, and you want to just get all this punchy dialogue. But I really like to hear the space. So we open it up wherever we can. But Carnegie Hall is Carnegie Hall. It's an amazing space to be in, and it's incredible to be on the stage at Carnegie Hall. And I guess how you get to Carnegie Hall is not just practice, as the old joke says, but you got to play your cards right. And as he tells her, the window's only open for a certain amount of time before it closes. And that was the lesson there. Seize the day, seize your opportunity. So it's just a terrific scene.
Yeah. And Ron, you go from, I think it starts Lenny's backstage, the door opens, and he's sort of like, I wish you could see what I see, being on stage at Carnegie Hall. And then you bring it down from the explosion of an opening night to two people.
Yeah, no, 408 gave us dynamics, which is something we don't always get, with Maisel, because it's usually scene after scene after scene in some explosive way. And, 408 had its moments where it became kind of like, no, Midge, slow down, think what you're doing. And this was one of those scenes with the two of them on the stage at Carnegie Hall. And we had to add those footsteps in. We had to, put in all the little detaily things that might give us a little extra bit of reverb to play with too, to give that emptiness space feel. And that whole scene is about Midge. Wouldn't you like to do this? Wouldn't you like to be in this kind of a position? And then this is the price you have to pay to get there, and you're not doing it. I mean, I think it's the culmination of the whole season to just kind of try to get her to think straight. And, where it goes in season 5, I can't even tell you. I've only seen the first episode.
Oh, I can tell you things, but I can't.
Yeah, but you don't want to.
But we'd have to turn off the recording
before the fall. She, as you said, she's her own worst enemy, and she needed to get her head screwed on right. So I know a lot of the fans were kind of frustrated with her inability to take responsibility for why she got fired off of the Shy Baldwin tour and actually being angry about it instead of contrite. And people were a little upset about it, but it was all leading to that last scene at Carnegie Hall where all her follies of pride and I want to do it my way when I don't even have enough of a fan base to be able to stand up on my own. It all comes to a head in that one scene. And it leads us right into where we're going in season 5.
I think it also becomes like that moment where you realize that we've just spent the season learning all these different things about all the other characters, and where the hell is that going to go in 5? And it was a weird season, Tom, because of the whole COVID world, and COVID had a weird, I think, effect to the writing. I think it had a weird effect. It certainly had a weird effect on how we worked. I'm just thrilled we ended up with a great season.
Oh, you really did. And it ends in an appropriate place. I mean, it's the final scene. The thing that struck me near the end is that she almost gets like a minute where she's watching Lenny Bruce and she's a fan again. And she's chasing him in the hallway. And she says, what do you mean? You're insanely good tonight. And then she gets the lecture in a way. And it brings it up. That's the two sides of her personality, in a sense, like your own worst. And gentlemen, thank you. Ron, Matthew, I know, Matthew, you're out working on season 5 in Brooklyn now. And Ron, you'll soon be mixing season 5.
We have been. I've got one down.
One down.
We finally finished an episode, Ron.
The second one's in shop. So.
We finally finished an episode the other day. We're into episode 6 now, but we haven't fully completed. We only finally finished episode 4 for the season, but we're still reshooting stuff. Really shooting stuff for season 1 on Monday.
Yep. That's kind of how this season has gone. It's one of those peppery ones where they get as much as they can, but then there's something in the script that requires either a different time or a different location, and or a different actor, and that COVID is still affecting everything a little bit, but certainly not as bad as last year was.
The challenges industry wide. It's amazing to me this stuff gets on TV and it's so good, so well done. I mean, I applaud you, gentlemen. This is your fourth nomination for this show.
Third, actually.
Third nomination for this show. My apologies. But a fantastic job. Fantastic job all around. And I wish you luck when the voting starts this week. All right.
Thank you very much.
Back to Brooklyn for you, Matthew. Back to C5 in New York City for you, Ron.
Yep.
And again, congratulations.
Thank you.